The sun was setting over Singapore's bustling financial district, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Raj stood at his office window on the 47th floor, watching the city transform into a sea of twinkling lights. His reflection in the glass told the story of a successful man, perfectly tailored suit, expensive watch, and not a single hair out of place. But his eyes carried a weight that no amount of success could lift. As CEO of TechVision Global, he had everything that looked good on paper. The company's stock had tripled under his leadership, tech magazines featured him on their covers, and his schedule was packed with meetings with world leaders and industry giants. Yet here he was, alone in his office at 9 p.m., holding his phone and staring at the family chat that he hadn't responded to in weeks. His fingers scrolled through old messages and photos. His daughter had won the national science competition last month. He'd sent a congratulatory text and a gift card. His son had made the basketball team. He'd managed a quick video call between board meetings. His wife had started a small bakery, turning her passion into a business. He'd liked her social media posts and promised to visit soon. But soon had stretched into months and months into years. The cleaning lady's vacuum cleaner hummed outside his office, a familiar evening sound that reminded him of home. Back in Mumbai, his mom used to clean while singing old Bollywood songs. He smiled at the memory, then felt a pang of guilt. He'd missed her birthday celebration last week, sending flowers and a card instead. Raj walked to his desk, where a small photo frame sat next to his multiple business awards. The picture showed a younger version of himself, sitting on their old apartment's balcony with his family, all of them laughing at some forgotten joke. His daughter was missing her front teeth, his son was wearing his basketball jersey backward, and his wife was looking at him with eyes full of love and pride. They looked happy, connected, real. He picked up another business magazine featuring his latest achievement. "The Man with the Golden Touch," the headline declared. Raj let out a quiet laugh. All that gold couldn't fill the growing emptiness in his chest or bridge the 4,000-kilometer gap between his office and his home. His phone buzzed, another business alert. Underneath it was an unread message from his wife. "The kids ask about you every day. They're growing up so fast." He started typing "I'm busy with," then stopped. How many times had he used that excuse? The night cleaning lady appeared at his door. "Sir, you're still here? Your family must miss you." Her simple observation hit harder than any business crisis he'd faced. She reminded him of his mother, the same gentle concern in her voice, the same wisdom in her words. Raj looked around his spacious office, taking in the certificates, the awards, the evidence of his professional success. On his desk, his calendar showed back-to-back meetings for the next 3 months. Board presentations, investor calls, strategy sessions. He could recite his schedule in his sleep, but he couldn't remember the last time he'd sat down for a family dinner or helped with homework or just listened to his wife talk about her day. He walked to his private bathroom and splashed water on his face. The man in the mirror was a stranger to his own children. His son had started calling him sir during their brief video calls, a word that felt like a wall between them. His daughter had stopped sharing her daily stories, now only sending formal updates about her achievements. The city lights continued their eternal dance outside his window, but for the first time in years, they looked less like stars of success and more like distant memories of what truly mattered. His phone buzzed again. A photo of his family at dinner, an empty chair visible in the frame. His chair. Success had become his prison, and he was both the prisoner and the guard. Every promotion, every deal, every milestone had added another bar to his cage, distancing him from the very people he claimed to be working for. As night settled over Singapore, Raj realized that his greatest achievement had become his biggest failure. He had mastered the art of making money, but had forgotten the art of making memories. He had learned to lead thousands, but had lost touch with leading his own family. The distance between success and happiness stretched before him like the city below, vast, glittering, and somehow empty. It started like any other Tuesday at TechVision Global. Raj sat at the head of the gleaming conference table, surrounded by charts showing rising profits and market expansion plans. The board members nodded along as he presented their latest quarterly results, their faces glowing with satisfaction at the numbers on the screen. Then his personal assistant slipped into the room, something she never did during board meetings. The look on her face made his heart skip a beat. She handed him a note. Emergency call from your sister. Your father is in the hospital. The words on the paper blurred. The voice of the board member discussing Asian market penetration faded into background noise. Rage's mind raced to the last conversation he had with his father 3 months ago. They had argued about his absence from family gatherings, his father's voice heavy with disappointment. Better, money isn't everything. Sir? The concern in his assistant's voice brought him back to the present. The board members were staring at him, waiting for his response to a question he hadn't heard. For the first time in his career, Raj stood up in the middle of a board meeting. I apologize, but I need to take an emergency call. Please continue without me. In his office, his sister's voice crackled through the phone, thick with tears. Papa had a heart attack. He's stable now, but she paused, gathering herself. He was asking for you before they took him to the hospital. He misses you, Bai. We all do. Raj sank into his chair, his carefully constructed world of business success crumbling around him. On his desk, next to his laptop, sat the Father's Day card he'd meant to send 2 months ago. It was still unsealed, unwritten, a perfect metaphor for his failing as a son. His hand trembled as he opened his desk drawer, pulling out an old family photo he kept hidden beneath contracts and reports. It showed his father teaching him to ride a bicycle, his large hands steady on the back of the seat, his face beaming with pride. Now those same hands lay connected to hospital monitors, and he wasn't there. The city hummed outside his window, but for once, Raj couldn't hear it. Instead, he heard his father's voice from years ago. Family is like a tree beta. The stronger the roots, the higher it can grow. He had forgotten those roots, chasing the heights of success while the foundation of his life weakened. Walking to his private bathroom, he splashed water on his face and stared at his reflection. Gray hairs had appeared at his temples. When had that happened? The lines around his eyes told stories of countless late nights at the office, while missing the stories that mattered: his children's growing years, his wife's dreams, his parents' aging days. His phone buzzed with messages from the board meeting he'd left, but for the first time he ignored them. Instead, he found himself looking at flight schedules to Mumbai. The thought of leaving during the biggest quarter of the year would have been unthinkable yesterday. Today, the thought of not leaving seemed impossible. As he packed his bag that evening, his hands ran across his father's old watch, a graduation gift he'd stopped wearing because it didn't match his expensive suits. He put it on, the familiar weight on his wrist a reminder of simpler, perhaps happier times. The night cleaning lady found him sitting in his office, still staring at the photo. "Everything okay, sir?" she asked, her kind eyes reminding him of his mother. He showed her the picture, and she smiled. "You know, sir, my father always said that time is the only thing you can't earn back." That night, as his driver took him to the airport, Singapore's famous skyline glittered like stars fallen to earth. But Raj wasn't looking at the buildings anymore. In his mind, he saw his father's hospital room, his mother's worried face, his sister's tired eyes. He saw all the moments he'd missed, all the love he'd taken for granted. His phone rang, another business crisis demanding attention, but as the car sped through the night, Raj made a decision that would change everything. Some calls were more important than others. Some matters couldn't wait for the next quarter's results. Some investments, in love, in family, in being there, paid dividends that no balance sheet could measure. The Mumbai airport felt different this time. Usually, Raj would stride through with his business luggage, heading straight for meetings. Today, he stood still in the arrival hall, his designer shoes suddenly feeling out of place on the familiar tiles. The humidity wrapped around him like a forgotten embrace, bringing back memories of childhood summers. His mother's driver waited with a sign, though Raj barely recognized him. Had he really been away so long that the young man's hair had started graying? The drive home was quiet, each familiar street corner telling stories of a life he'd left behind. The corner shop where he used to buy ice cream with his pocket money now had a modern facade. The park where he played cricket had new benches. Everything had changed, yet somehow remained the same. The family home loomed ahead, its white walls holding decades of memories. His heart pounded as the car pulled up to the gate. Through the garden window, he could see his mother in her favorite spot, reading her morning newspaper. She looked smaller than he remembered, more fragile. The weight of his absence pressed heavily on his chest. The front door opened before he could reach for it. His mother stood there, her eyes filling with tears. For a moment, they just looked at each other, the successful CEO and the mother who still saw her little boy. Then she pulled him into a hug, and suddenly he was 10 years old again, coming home after a long school day. "Better," she whispered, her voice shaking. "You're finally home." The simple words carried years of longing, of missed festivals and empty chairs at dinner tables. His mother's embrace smelled of home-cooked food and jasmine flowers, scents his luxurious Singapore apartment could never replicate. Inside, the house was a time capsule of his life. Photos lined the walls: his graduation, his wedding, his children's births. Recent photos were conspicuously absent, marking the years of his absence like missing chapters in a family album. His old cricket trophies still stood proudly in the display cabinet, gathered more dust now, but still catching the morning light. "Your father is waiting," his mother said softly, leading him to the car. The hospital wasn't far, but each minute stretched like an hour. In his pocket, his phone buzzed constantly with work messages. For the first time, he turned it off completely. The hospital corridor seemed endless. The antiseptic smell reminded him of his own mortality, of time wasted chasing temporary achievements while permanent bonds weakened. Outside his father's room, his sister waited. Her hug was different from his mother's, tighter, almost desperate, as if afraid he might disappear again. "Papa has been asking for you every hour," she said, wiping her eyes. "He keeps telling the nurses his son is coming from Singapore." Such pride in his voice, always such pride. Raj took a deep breath before entering the room. The sight of his father, the strongest man he knew, lying in a hospital bed with tubes and monitors around him, shook him to his core. But his father's eyes, they lit up like festival lights when he walked in. "Ah, my international businessman is here," his father called out, his voice weaker than Raj remembered but still carrying that familiar warmth. Come, show your old father what Singapore has done to you." Sitting beside the hospital bed, holding his father's hand, Raj felt the walls he'd built around his heart crumbling. His father's palm was rough against his smooth, office-softened hands, a testament to the hard work that had given Raj the opportunities he used to drift away. "You look tired, Beta," his father said, studying his face with concerned eyes. "All those meetings and deals, they take something from you, don't they? Some things money can't buy back." The wisdom in those simple words struck deeper than any corporate strategy session. His father had always known, had always seen what Raj had been blind to. Success wasn't just about climbing higher, it was about keeping your feet firmly planted in the soil that nourished you. As evening settled over Mumbai, the hospital room filled with stories, some old, some new, all precious. His father's eyes sparkled as he talked about the grandchildren's achievements, his voice carrying equal measures of joy and sadness at having to hear these stories secondhand. "Life is not in the years, Beta," his father said as visiting hours drew to a close. "It's in the moments. And moments don't wait for convenient times in our busy schedules." Walking out of the hospital that night, Raj felt both lighter and heavier. Lighter from reconnecting with his roots, heavier with the realization of all he'd missed. The Mumbai traffic humped and bustled around him, a chaotic symphony so different from Singapore's ordered efficiency. But tonight, it sounded like music, like the soundtrack of a homecoming long overdue. Days in Mumbai unfolded differently from the strict schedules of Singapore. Mornings began with the sound of pressure cookers whistling and birds chirping outside his window. A gentle awakening compared to his usual blaring phone alarms. Raj found himself sitting in the family kitchen, watching his mother prepare breakfast just like she used to when he was a boy. "Your children love my homemade parathas," she said one morning, rolling out the dough with practiced ease. "When they visited last summer, they would wait here every morning just like you used to." The words stung. Another family gathering he had missed, buried in work meetings halfway across the continent. His son video called daily now, excited to show him the science project he was working on. "Dad, I built a mini solar system," he exclaimed, holding up a carefully crafted model. "Mom helped with the painting, but I did all the research myself." Raj realized he didn't even know his son had developed such a passion for astronomy. When had that happened? His daughter, now in her final year of school, shared her dreams of becoming an environmental scientist. "The coral reefs are dying, Papa," she explained during their evening calls, her eyes bright with purpose. Someone needs to help save them. He remembered when her biggest concern was which color hair clip to wear. He had missed the transformation of his little girl into a young woman with a mission. Between hospital visits to his father, Raj wandered through the neighborhood. The local chai shop owner recognized him, though Raj had forgotten his name. "Your father comes here every morning," the man said, handing him a cup of masala chai. "He always talks about his son, the big businessman in Singapore. But you know what he's most proud of? The time you helped my son with his math homework 15 years ago." That evening, Raj found a box of old photographs in his bedroom closet. There he was, teaching the chai shop owner's son algebra, his father watching proudly from the doorway. Another photo showed his daughter's first dance performance. He had attended that one 7 years ago, before international expansion plans consumed his life. His son's 10th birthday party, where they had all played cricket in the backyard. His wife's smile was radiant in every picture, but he noticed how it gradually became more reserved in recent photos, like a flower closing its petals. His wife called every evening, her voice carrying both love and uncertainty. "The bakery is doing well," she shared. "Remember how you used to taste all my new recipes?" He did remember, lazy Sunday mornings filled with laughter and the smell of fresh bread. When had he stopped having time for those moments? One afternoon, helping his mother sort through old papers, he found his children's letters to him. "Dear Papa, I got first prize in the science fair. I wish you could have seen my project. Papa, I made the basketball team. Coach says I play just like you used to." Each letter was a milestone he had acknowledged with quick phone calls and expensive gifts, missing the real treasure, the chance to see joy light up their faces in person. His father grew stronger each day, but the hospital stays gave them time to talk. Really talk, not the surface-level conversations they'd had over rushed phone calls. "You know, Beta," his father said one afternoon, "when I started our family business, I thought success meant bigger profits every year. But then one day, you had a high fever. Your mother and I stayed up all night, watching you breathe. That's when I realized success means nothing if you're not there for the moments that matter." During his morning walks in the family garden, Raj noticed how his mother had maintained his old science project, a small vegetable patch he had started in school. "Your daughter planted tomatoes here last summer," she told him. "She said it made her feel closer to you, doing something you once loved." As weeks passed, Raj found himself remembering how to live differently. He learned that his son had inherited his love for old Hindi songs, that his daughter could perfectly mimic his mother's laugh, that his wife had kept every birthday card he had ever given her. These weren't details you could capture in quick video calls or WhatsApp messages. The constant ping of work emails continued, but they seemed less urgent now. Instead of immediately responding, he found himself sitting with his mother, learning the secret ingredients of her recipes. He spent afternoons listening to his father's stories about building their family business, stories he used to think he didn't have time for. Each day revealed another piece of his family's life that had continued without him, another thread of connection he needed to carefully weave back into place. The morning started with the usual chaos of Mumbai traffic outside, but inside the family home, something was different. Raj sat in the garden, sipping his mother's hand-ground coffee, when his phone started buzzing nonstop. 20 missed calls from Singapore, 50 urgent emails. His assistant's message made his heart sink. Global tech is attempting a hostile takeover. Board needs you back immediately. His father was reading the morning newspaper nearby, finally home from the hospital. He noticed Raj's changed expression. "Beta, is everything okay?" The concern in his voice made Raj feel like a schoolboy again, worried about a difficult exam. Inside, Raj's mother was teaching his wife how to make the perfect biryani over a video call. Their laughter floated through the open windows, a sound he had almost forgotten. His phone buzzed again, the board chairman this time. "Company shares are dropping. Media is all over this. We need our CEO." Raj walked to his old room, now filled with fresh flowers his mother placed there every morning. His laptop screen showed the news. Tech Vision Global under attack. CEO absent during crisis. The words felt like accusations. Opening his email, he found messages from investors, partners, and employees, all seeking reassurance, all needing answers. His sister dropped by with lunch, bringing her famous mango pickle. "You look worried, Bai," she said, setting down the container. "Is it work?" Before he could answer, his phone lit up with another call from Singapore. She watched him decline it, something the old Raj would never have done. Later that afternoon, during his father's checkup, the family doctor shared old stories about Raj's childhood. "You were always in such a hurry to grow up," the doctor chuckled. "Always running somewhere." Raj's phone continued its urgent dance in his pocket, each vibration a reminder of the crisis unfolding thousands of miles away. His wife called as evening approached. "I saw the news," she said softly. "The kids are asking if you're coming home early." Home? The word caught in his throat. Which home did she mean? The luxury apartment in Singapore where his awards gathered dust, or here, where his mother's flowers filled his room with fragrance? The board scheduled an emergency video call. Raj set up his laptop in his father's study, surrounded by old family photos and business certificates. As faces appeared on screen, their panic was visible. "The takeover bid is aggressive," his CFO explained. "Without you here, investors are losing confidence. We need you back in Singapore. Tonight." Looking around the study, Raj's eyes fell on a particular photo, his father receiving his first business award. But in the picture, his father wasn't looking at the award. Instead, he was looking at his family, standing proud beside him. The real prize wasn't in his hands, but in the people around him. His phone rang again. This time it was his son. "Papa, I got selected for the science competition finals. It's next week. Will you?" The boy's voice trailed off, used to disappointment. In the background, Raj could hear his daughter practicing her speech about ocean conservation. The crisis demanded a decision. His laptop showed stock prices falling. WhatsApp messages flooded in from worried employees. The board was waiting for his answer about returning to Singapore. Two worlds pulled at him, the global CEO who never failed, and the father who had been failing for years. That evening, his father found him sitting in the garden, lost in thought. "You know, Beta," he said, settling into his favorite chair, "when I had my heart attack, my biggest fear wasn't dying. It was leaving things unsaid, moments unlived." He paused, looking at his son. "Some battles are worth losing, if it means winning what really matters." Raj looked at his phone. Another urgent message about the takeover. Then he looked at the house, where his mother was arranging flowers, humming an old song. Through the window, he could see the family photos on the wall, frozen moments of joy, love, and connection. The board was still waiting for his answer. Singapore's skyscrapers and corporate battles seemed distant now, like a dream he had been too busy chasing. Here, in his family's garden, with the smell of jasmine in the air and his father's words in his heart, the path forward slowly became clear. His whole life, he had chosen business over bonds, deals over dinner conversations, profits over presence. Now, facing the biggest crisis of his career, he had to make a choice that would define not just his future, but his legacy. The decision would either heal the wounds of absence or deepen them beyond repair. The sun hadn't yet risen over Mumbai when Raj made his decision. Instead of booking a flight back to Singapore, he walked into his father's study and opened his laptop. His fingers moved across the keyboard, typing an email that would change everything. "I'm staying in Mumbai, but we're going to handle this differently." For the next 2 hours, he called each board member personally, not with apologizes or excuses, but with a plan. "We've built a strong team," he told them. "Now it's time to trust them." His CFO would lead the financial defense. His operations head would maintain stability. His technology director would drive innovation. Leadership wasn't about doing everything yourself, it was about empowering others to excel. His wife couldn't believe the news when he called. "You're staying?" The hope in her voice made his heart ache. "But what about the company?" He smiled, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. "I'm still CEO," he said, "just a different kind of CEO now." That afternoon, he sat in his son's room during their video call, surrounded by old cricket trophies and new science books. "Your competition is next week, right?" "I'll be there." His son dropped his phone in surprise. "Really? But what about your meetings?" Raj shook his head. "Some meetings are more important than others." His mother found him later in the kitchen, trying to learn how to make chapatis. His first attempts were hilariously misshapen. "Beta, what are you doing?" She laughed, flour dusting the air. "Learning what matters," he replied, as another chapati refused to become round. His father watched from the doorway, eyes twinkling with understanding. The takeover crisis didn't disappear. But instead of rushing back to Singapore, Raj transformed his father's study into a command center. Modern technology met traditional wisdom as he guided his team through video calls, his father's old business books lining the walls behind him. "Remember when you taught me that business is about relationships?" he asked his father one evening. "I finally understand what you meant." His daughter's evening calls became strategy sessions of a different kind. She shared her plans for marine conservation while he shared company updates. "Papa, your company could help fund research," she exclaimed one day. Her passion sparked an idea. Corporate responsibility didn't have to be just a buzzword. The media noticed the change. "CEO fights takeover bid while reconnecting with family," read one headline. His inbox filled with messages from other executives, many confessing their own struggles with work-life balance. Raj realized he wasn't just fighting for his company, he was challenging a culture that valued presence in boardrooms over presence in living rooms. His wife's bakery became his second office. During their video calls, he would watch her knead dough while discussing company matters. "You're different," she observed one evening. Calmer somehow, he realized she was right. The constant urgency that had driven him for years had been replaced by something steadier, more sustainable. The takeover attempt hit obstacles. Raj's team, empowered and trusted, found innovative solutions. Employee loyalty strengthened as they watched their CEO prioritize family without abandoning responsibility. Stock prices stabilized. The same business magazines that had praised his single-minded dedication now wrote about his revolutionary approach to leadership. His father's recovery continued, marked by morning walks where they discussed everything from business ethics to cricket scores. "You know," his father said one day, "true strength isn't in carrying all the weight yourself. It's in knowing how to share the load." His mother started teaching him old family recipes over weekend afternoons. Between stirring pots of curry and chopping vegetables, she shared stories of his childhood. "You always wanted to save the world," she reminded him. "But sometimes the world that needs saving is right here at home." The day of his son's science competition arrived. Raj sat in the audience, not checking his phone, fully present. His son's project, a study on renewable energy, won first place. The pride on his boy's face was worth more than any business deal. That evening, during the family celebration, his phone buzzed with news from Singapore. The takeover bid had been withdrawn. His team had done it, proving that success didn't require their CEO to sacrifice everything else. As they shared the victory over a video call, Raj realized he hadn't just transformed his own life. He had shown his entire company a new way of working, a new definition of leadership. Looking around the dinner table that night, at his father's proud smile, his mother's twinkling eyes, and the family pictures on the walls, Raj understood that some victories aren't announced in press releases or measured in stock prices. They're measured in moments, in relationships restored, in trust rebuilt, and in the quiet joy of simply being there. 3 months had passed since the takeover crisis, and Mumbai's morning light streamed through the windows of Raj's childhood home. The same windows where he once dreamed of becoming successful now framed a different kind of achievement. His whole family gathered for breakfast, something that hadn't happened in years. His father sat at the head of the table, looking healthier than ever, sharing his morning newspaper with Raj's son, who was eagerly reading the science section. His mother moved between kitchen and dining room, sneaking extra portions onto everyone's plates while pretending not to. His daughter was explaining her latest environmental project to anyone who would listen, her hands moving animatedly as she spoke about saving coral reefs. "Papa, when are we going back to Singapore?" his son asked, looking up from the newspaper. Raj smiled, remembering how that question used to fill him with anxiety. Now he had a different answer. "We'll go next month, beta, but only for 2 weeks. Then we'll come back here." The new arrangement had taken shape naturally. Raj had restructured Tech Vision Global to allow for remote leadership, splitting his time between Mumbai and Singapore. Technology helped, video calls, digital documents, virtual meetings, but the real change was in his mindset. His wife's bakery had opened a branch in Singapore, bringing her passion for baking to a new market. The children spent school terms in Singapore and holidays in Mumbai, getting the best of both worlds. His phone buzzed, a message from his Singapore team about their latest project. But unlike before, he didn't jump to answer it immediately. Instead, he watched his mother teaching his wife the secret to perfect doll, their laughter filling the kitchen with warmth. Some messages could wait. You know, his father said, folding his newspaper, your company's profits are higher than ever. There was a knowing smile on his face. The numbers were true. TechVision Global had not just survived the crisis, it had thrived. Employees were more productive, innovation had increased, and workplace satisfaction was at an all-time high. The business magazines that once praised his brutal work schedule now wrote about the Mumbai model of leadership, proving that success didn't require sacrificing family. His daughter ran into the room, excited about a letter she'd received. "Papa, remember that environmental proposal I showed you? Your company's foundation approved it." The joy in her eyes reminded him of himself at her age, full of dreams and determination. But unlike him, she wouldn't have to choose between her ambitions and her family. Later that morning, during a video call with his leadership team, someone asked about his secret to handling the recent crisis. Behind him, the sounds of his family going about their day filtered through. His mother's pressure cooker whistling, his son practicing his science presentation, his wife discussing recipes with her bakery staff. "The secret," he said, "is remembering what you're really working for." His sister dropped by for lunch, bringing her famous mango pickle and news from the neighborhood. The chai shop owner's son, whom Raj had once tutored in math, had graduated from engineering college. "He says your story inspired him," she told Raj. About how success isn't just about making money. Evening found them all in the garden, where his mother's jasmine plants filled the air with sweetness. His father was teaching his grandchildren the card games he once taught Raj, while his wife captured the moment on her phone. Looking at them, Raj remembered the man he used to be, always rushing, always chasing the next big deal, always somewhere else in his mind, even when his body was present. The transformation hadn't been easy. There were still challenging days, times when business demands tested his resolve. But now he had a different measure of success. It wasn't in the awards on his office wall or the figures in his bank account. It was in his daughter's uninhibited hugs, his son's excited sharing of daily discoveries, his wife's relaxed smile, his parents' proud eyes. His phone lit up with another message, an invitation to speak at a global business conference. The topic? Redefining success. The future of leadership. Raj looked at his family, gathered in the garden of his childhood home, and knew exactly what he would say. Success wasn't a destination you reached by leaving everything behind. It was a journey you took with the people who mattered most. As the sun set over Mumbai, painting the sky in brilliant colors, Raj realized that he had finally found what he had been searching for all along. Not in Singapore's gleaming towers or in boardroom victories, but right here, in the simple joy of being present, in the quiet strength of family bonds, in the perfect balance of ambition and love. His mother called everyone in for dinner, her voice carrying the same warmth it had when he was a child. His father slowly stood up, patting his grandson's head. His wife caught his eye and smiled, that same smile that had won his heart years ago. This, Raj knew, was his true legacy. Not the business empire he had built, but the love he had learned to nurture, the relationships he had learned to prioritize, the balance he had finally found.